Lab number 247. In this lab, we will add JSONStore to our hybrid wallet. And the idea is that we will take some data, in our case it will be messages that probably the bank sending to a user, and store it in JSONStore, and when we'll open the messages tab, we will take those messages from this JSONStore and display on the page. Quite simple example, and first of all we'll need to create this backend service. So let's open our browser and navigate to get-sandbox.com. So we'll use the same service for a mockup. You need to enter your credentials and click sign in. So we'll add new route here. Let's call it something like get messages, just like that, and click create. Afterwards, go to Dropbox folder lab 247 files, or if you have it downloaded on your machine, open this folder and open messages.js with some text editor, and basically what you need to do is to copy everything that is inside and then pass inside this get messages that we just created, replacing everything that is there. So basically what we will have in return, we'll have this messages with repeatable items. We'll have 3 messages that has a date and the text. Quite simple. Let's click update and check how it works. Yep, we got our reply after calling this get messages. Next step for us is actually to modify our adapter. For that, let's open our Atom text editor, navigate to hybrid wallet server adapters to wallet adapter, and let's open the XML file and add one more procedure called the same way, get messages. Just like that. So now we need to change GS file, and we can just copy something like get limit, for example, pass it once again here and change the name to get messages, and then change the path to get messages. That's it. We can save this file, open the terminal in bottom panel, navigate inside our hybrid wallet server project, start the server. If you have it already started, just type mfp push, but I will need to start, and during the startup it will deploy actually all the changes that we made to adapter. Okay, after our server has been started, we can now go and work with the client-side code. So first of all, we will need to open our Cordova project and modify services file, services.js. As you remember, we are calling the adapters using the services, so we will need to add one more. And let's call it something like the same request messages. So I will copy request limit and pass it once again with changing the name to request messages. Then we need to change the URL. In our case it will be get messages. So we don't need anything else. Parameters are empty, everything remains the same. So that's all that we need to do with services.js. And next up is the controllers. So in the controllers, let's first load the messages inside the tabs controller, and then we will try to open our JSON store that we will init in tabs controller inside the settings controller, just to make it more interesting. So first of all, in tabs controller, let's create some kind of function that can be called from other controllers. So we'll define it with root scope, and let's call it load messages. Something like that. So we won't pass any input parameters to it, and what we will do inside is we will try to load messages from a server and put them into JSONStore. So for that we can copy one of the examples that we have for a service request. We will anyway need to do it. So request messages will be appropriate service. Let's add some login. messages service response with results. We won't go to a different state. We don't need a navigation here. So what we actually need here is to init a collection for JSONStore. So in our case, first of all, we'll need to provide the parameters for a collection. So let's have something like var collections, where we will state what kind of collections we will load, and we will have just one. Let's call it messages. And inside this messages collection, we will have just one parameter to be set that is really the required, not optional, is the search fields. So search fields indicate how we will search for items, and we will use them to replace the items in collection in case some new messages will come. First of all, we'll need to find out how we will search. And because we have only two fields, like text and this is string, as you remember, and in our case the date is also string, we will just put it here. So both of them string. Next thing is we will have empty options, but maybe we'll change it in the future. So I will indicate options, just initialize them here. Next thing that we will do is actually using the worklight libraries, worklight JSONStore init. We'll init this collection, so we'll need to pass as a parameter collections that we just defined here, just messages, and we will also need to pass options here. And then we'll have a callback. So if init's completed successfully, then we will actually try to put the data inside. If the init failed, then we will deal with it somehow. But for now, let's just add login. So when the init is success or fail, so we already defined success, and we will also define fail. Let's have here login something like error, so we will know what happened. And then inside we'll do a simple login. In both cases, in this case, we will log error and type something like collection init fail. And here we will type collection init success. Next, what we will do after init is completed, inside the successful callback, we will try to put documents inside. We will do it using the change API. So the idea is that we will place in a JSONStore on those docs that are really modified or that are new, but we won't replace the existing ones. So we can do it using collection gets. First of all, we need to get collection and then change API. So for change API, we first of all need to provide the name of our collection. So in our case, collection name will be equal to messages, as we defined it here, the name of the collection. Then the second thing, we need to provide the options for a change. So let's call it something like change options. And here there are a few things that are really important. So first of all, something called replace criteria. So this one is actually analog of the search fields. Here we will need to state with this bracket what kind of fields we will look for. So in our case we have only two, so we will look for text and for date. So assuming that if any of them will be changed, then we will replace the document with the new one. And basically this is really tricky because, for example, if you have a quite big document, the good idea is just to replace it by ID, but imagine the ID is the same and the document is changed. So you need to add some additional fields that you want to search for, or in your documents there should be something like revision, which is much better option. So together with replace criteria, we should add new. So this will indicate that we will add new documents in case we will find any, and mark dirty will be set to false. This one actually indicates documents as dirty if there are any changes made on the local, JSON store compared to the documents that we got from a server. So just like that, and now we can do almost the same worklight JSONStore get. We need to provide here a collection name. And then using the change API, first of all, we will need to provide the new data that we got, and we will got it from our results, the call that we had to a server, and then the result that we got in reply, and messages inside. So as you remember, in our get messages, we have here repeatable messages inside our result. And then also change options. So afterwards we will implement a callbacks. So in case of success, we will have something like loaded docs as an input parameter. So this will be a number of documents that we downloaded from a server. And let's just log in. Something like collection docs at success, loaded, and then the number of docs. So here we'll have this loaded docs, something like that. And then in case it will fail, we'll also add a fail callback. So let's also specify the error for a fail callback, and something like almost the same idea. Collection docs at failed, and then our error. The good idea will be also to calculate how many docs do we have in our JSON store, how many docs we received from server and so on, and then display this number as the badge on our tab. So for that, after a successful callback, let's add some kind of variable like count new, for example. And here we will need to calculate, let's have result messages that we have inside, and then calculate the length of it and assign it to this count new. So we need to initialize this count new. Just like that. And we can log it here. Something like we got, then our count new. Number of messages, and we will also need to change tabs template. So we will display it here in the tab. So it should look like this. We will have a directive called badge to which we need to assign a variable. In our case, the variable will be count new, and then we will also need to add a class. Something like badge style will be appropriate directive here, and then let's have it red, something like badge assertive, to have them in red color. Let's go back to controllers, and what we need to do next is to add a messages page. So we will define new controller, and we will define a new page. So let's start with the controller. I will actually modify this chat detail controller because we don't need it. So let's call it messages controller. So we don't need state params, we don't need chats here, we just need scope. And what we need inside is, first of all, we need to define almost the same. We need to define a collection name, and then we need to try to get data from it. So let's start with the collection name, and then we will open JSONStore documents with val JSONStore .get. We will pass in the name of our collection inside. And then we have API find all that will try to find all documents that we have inside this collection. Of course, you can use the complex query and you can find something specific, but we have there only one thing, so we will need to get only messages from there. So we'll find all and then assign the array of results to our scope messages that we'll define here. So let's have a function here on successful completion of this find all with array of our results. And what we will do here is we'll have something like scope messages with the list of messages where we will assign this array results. And let's also do a login. Something like messages loaded, and then the scope messages. We will need to initialize it already, also before scope messages, just like that. And the last thing is that we will need to apply the changes to scope. Just like that. Now let's open app.js and actually add these messages. So we can change, for example, this tab chats to tab messages with the URL messages. And the view also messages, and then the templates tab messages, just like that, and the controller also messages controller. We don't need chat details, so we can simply remove that totally and save this app.js, and we will need to add this tab messages HTML. So let's actually rename existing tab chats to tab messages. Just like that, and we don't need chat details, so we can remove it from here. Actually, we can also remove the blur components folder on top, because as you remember, we don't need it. We already moved that component to lib folder. Now let's go back to tabs and modify here tab chats to tab messages. And also modify the URL that we are going to tab messages, just like this. And the last step is we actually need to modify the tab messages HTML. So we'll start with view title, let's call it messages, just like that. Then we actually don't need everything that is inside this ion content, so we'll simply remove everything and we'll start from scratch. So let's create a repeatable div, something like we'll implement it with ng-repeat, and what we'll be repeating is the single message inside the messages array that we just got from JSONStore. So basically inside we will use the cart system. If we will go to the browser and navigate to Ionic Framework, to CSS, and then to carts. This is the simple example that we will use for a cart, so let's just copy it and pass inside our text editor. So here inside we'll have just a text that we got. Important thing, after we are taking something from JSONStore, it will be available, I mean the variables under JSON, so it will look like message.json and then our text rather than message.text. This is the first thing that we need to do, and the second thing that we need to do is to add some information about date. So we will do it right after, somewhere here, div class message date. So this is the CSS class that we have to elegant text position to right, and also to have a specific font here, and we also will have padding right here to add some spacing from the right side, and inside we will have almost the same construction, message, then JSON, and then date, and we can close this div. So basically that's it. Now we can go back to our terminal, navigate the level back to our root folder, and then hybrid wallet Cordova, and then we can do mfp push to push the changes to a server that we just did to our app. So now we can actually type mfp preview, select the simple browser, and review our application. Okay, so something is wrong with our messages. As you see in the page, we have some issue here. Let's check the console. Yes, so actually our messages were not called, so this is the issue, and the init of our count new was done as an object rather than a text. So let's do a text. Then we will see the empty page, and we will also need to call somewhere these load messages. So we will do it right at the first control, the cards control that we used, and right after we finish this for each for our cards. So when we are loading transactions, after we are loading transactions, we also can load messages, just like that, and we will need to add a reference to the root scope on top of our controller, just like that, and we can push again. And now let's refresh this page. So we got 3 messages. It worked, most probably because we don't have scope apply, we are not seeing the page here. Let's check by clicking on messages. Yes, we got 3 messages from the list. So actually our collection was first initted, and then we add docs to it, and then the messages were loaded from a collection. Everything is cool except this part with the scope apply. So we should go back to our load messages, right here, and at the final stage where we actually calculating the number of messages that we got, we can do this scope apply like that and push again. Okay, let's go back to cards, refresh the page. Yes, so now we are seeing that we got 3 messages, and this digest issue, as I was saying before, we can actually make the safe scope apply, but this is additional complication and we don't need it in our demo application, so we can ignore this error for now. Uh, as you see, we actually have a duplication of our docs right now. So this is happening when we are mismatching the parameters for, replace criteria. So let's go and check what we did there. Well, replace criteria seems to be correct. We have some typos in console log. So let's change that. So if replace criteria are correct, then the search field. Yeah, so search fields should be the option. We have several of them, and this is the way how parameter should look. So before that, if you didn't define it, of course, the replace criteria won't work because it cannot find these search fields. So we should save this and push once again. And we should go to resources and remove from local storage our JSONStore, because otherwise, it will be exist with all these 6 variables. And now we can refresh the page. Okay, so we have 3 items. Let's refresh it once again. And again, we have 3 items. So basically that's it. We finished with the main part of this hybrid wallet application development. We will continue in next labs with push notifications and quality assurance, but for development we are done. So on this step our lab number 247 is finished. Thank you.